Thank you very much. I apologize for my error regarding the longevity of the coffee. No one suffers more than I. I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Ethan Vanderleek, who's coming to us all the way from Marquette University.
I live on campus even. So.
Ethan is going to be speaking on progress as conversion, Laudato Si between Guardini and Panikkar. Join me in welcoming Ethan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm going to start in what maybe some people would say is a pretentious way with 1 minute of Radiohead.
Yes.
Everything in Its Right Place by Radiohead offers a sound and a lyric that reflects the anxiety and paranoia of a digital age, both terribly simple and yet disturbingly strange. Your head immediately nods along to the rhythmic electronic keys. Singer Tom York's vocal drifts in, auto-tuned, repeating the disconcerting phrase, Kid A, the name of the album, bringing to mind some dystopian categorization system of children. Kid A, Kid B, Kid C, and so on. His falsetto drones on through the song, increasingly anxious and frustrated over just a few short lines. Everything in its right place. Yesterday I woke up sucking on lemon. There are two voices in my head. And finally, what is that you tried to say? This final line issues in the dynamic climax, as York is really intent on finding out what you tried to say, what you really meant. Yet communication is stalled, frustrated, aborted. He never finds out. The song diminishes, the vocal auto-tuned and truncated, reminding us, despite the unanswered question, everything is in its right place. The dream of modernity, everything in its right place, known and controllable by the human mind. Science and technology have successfully allowed for knowledge and control of, potentially, everything. Yet the song's dissonance, the singer's futile efforts to communicate, give the lie to this dream. For all our modern success, we are personally confused. There are two voices and more in my head, and communally fractured. As has been said so often, the digital connections we have through email and social media leave us hollow and unsatisfied. What was it you tried to say? Yet, perhaps the failed communication can be smoothed over, forgotten, as the song soothingly concludes. After all, everything is in its right place. The song juxtaposes, on the one hand, everything in its right place, scientifically known and technologically controlled, and on the other hand, the struggle and frustration of communication and wholeness. We have achieved so much scientifically and technologically, we have progressed, yet under the scrutiny of becoming fully human, living ethical and meaningful lives, such progress is ambiguous. Where exactly have we arrived that is so great? Such progress may even be regress when it comes to the most important things in our lives, like community, personal meaning, and relationships to others and to the earth. Francis offers reflections on these themes in Laudato Si, especially chapter 3, the human roots of our ecological crisis. Never has humanity had such power over itself, he writes there, yet nothing ensures that it will be used wisely. And earlier, he critically writes of those, quote, who doggedly uphold the myth of progress and tell us that ecological problems will solve themselves simply with the application of new technology and without any need of ethical considerations or deep change. Once again, there are two levels at work. On the one hand, the progress of science and technology, and on the other, the potential or even obvious regress of ethical depth and wisdom. Yet Francis equally wants to avoid the extreme of anti-humanism, a view of any and all human interaction with nature as a pernicious disease. Francis offers a theological critique of progress. If progress is understood as unlimited expansion of human knowledge and control, then theological anthropology must step in to remind us of our God-given limits, of learning to live in relations of dependence and peace, not pure activity and domination. If we acknowledge the value and the fragility of nature, he writes, and at the same time our God-given abilities, we can finally leave behind the modern myth of unlimited material progress. A fragile world entrusted by God to human care challenges us to devise intelligent ways of directing, developing, and limiting our power, end quote. Beyond a pure critique of progress, we hear an alternative challenge, not to exhaustively know and control, but to wisely dwell and encounter. Might this amount to not an utter rejection of progress, but instead its reorientation? As Francis suggests, there are perhaps other ways of understanding the economy and progress. He toggles between different uses of the word, sometimes harshly critical of an expansionist domineering account, yet other times urging progress in moral and religious matters. For example, as he writes, some countries have made significant progress in establishing sanctuaries on land and in the oceans, where any human intervention is prohibited, which might modify their features or alter their original structures. So I want to explore this positive idea of progress through the category of conversion, metanoia. In the concluding chapter, Francis describes ecological conversion. And this means we must change, progress from our current way of knowing and acting in the world into a future where, as individuals, communities, societies, as we just heard about, we know the world according to its deepest creaturely relation to the Creator, and we act in the world according to this relation, not according to truncated anthropocentric accounts of truth and goodness. Ecological conversion, Francis describes, means that the effects of our encounter with Jesus Christ become evident in our relationship with the world around us. Progress as conversion points to a future oriented away from anthropocentric or monolithic accounts of goodness and truth, and towards a dynamic community of relations between all people and between humanity and the world. So in support of this thesis, I turn to two interlocutors. Laudato Si's third chapter draws heavily from Romano Guardini's 1950 book, The End of the Modern World, which powerfully describes how modern progress is secretly but insistently destructive of both humanity and nature. Besides his papal predecessors, in Laudato Si, Francis cites no writer more than Guardini. Unsurprisingly so, since he worked on a doctoral dissertation on Guardini in the 1980s. Guardini's thought provides us further analysis of the deeply problematic nature of linear progress, yet also the ever-present possibility of new ways of relating to others and to the earth, that is, the possibility of conversion. And second, besides Pope Francis, another thinker who approvingly cites Guardini and also calls for conversion is interreligious theologian Raymond Panikkar. So I situate Laudato Si between the influence of Guardini and the trajectory of Panikkar. Together, these two thinkers might help to flesh out what Laudato Si teaches us about progress as conversion. Everything in its right place need not only mean a technological wasteland summarized by unsettling and catchy keyboard riffs. It may also suggest the endless task of situating ourselves amongst things, acting upon and with things and others as they call for, not just as we impose. Many decades before the end of the modern world, from 1923 to 25, Guardini wrote a series of letters while visiting Italy from Germany, published now as Letters from Lake Como, Explorations in Technology and the Human Race. He laments the shift he witnesses in the relation between nature and humanity. I felt as though a great process of dying had set in around me, he says. Humanity has always interacted with nature, shaped it according to certain human purposes, and this human cultivation he calls culture. Pre-modern culture, he says, was natural. Human interaction with nature involved both shaping and responding to nature's patterns, rhythms, and truths. His example here is a sailboat, which gently harnesses wood, linen, water, and wind, always attuned and connected to those natural realities. The lines and proportions of the ship, he writes, are still in profound harmony with the pressure of the wind and waves and the vital human measure. We have here real culture, elevation above nature, yet decisive nearness to it. We are still in a vital way body, but we are shot through with mind and spirit. In stark opposition to this natural culture, Guardini notices a new artificial culture, manifest in the modern steamship, the ocean liner. A colossus of this type, he writes, presses on through the sea, regardless of wind and waves. It is so large that nature has no power over it. Artificial culture is removed from humanity's harmonious collaboration with nature. Everything is understood abstractly and acted upon aggressively. Guardini's worry is that what appears to be progress in our power over nature in fact makes us less human. As he writes, the sphere in which we live is becoming more and more artificial, less and less human, more and more, I cannot help saying it, barbarian. Yet he strikingly concludes his letters with a call, not to withdraw from, but to embrace technology. What we need, he says, is not less technology, but more. Or, more accurately, we need stronger, more considered, more human technology, end quote. Instead of being controlled by the ultimately inhuman forces of artificial culture, we need humanity to reach within and without to grasp a new way of relating to nature. This is not to retreat to the harmony of the sailboat, but neither is it submission to the supposedly inevitable steamship. Quote, a new humanity must emerge of more profound intelligence, new freedom, new inwardness, new form, new ability to give form. This new humanity does involve a turn or conversion towards nature, but this turn cannot be a retreat to the past. It must in some way be a turn forward, a certain progress, we might say. This new humanity is possible, he says, quote, only if living people first make their influence felt in the sphere of objective nature, if they relate this nature to themselves and in this way create a world again, end quote. The suggestion then is to develop freedom and responsibility in the midst of and in response to our current situation, accepting in a certain sense our technology, our science, our mass age. We must first say yes to our age, he writes. We cannot solve the problem by retreating or simply seeking to alter or improve. Only a new initiative can bring a solution. Sentiments we will hear rephrased in Panikkar. The final letter concludes with a turn to God, convinced that providence is strangely at work in history, despite much evidence to the contrary. Indeed, the darkness of our age is also a promise that, shorn of our own abilities, we may perhaps be cast on God's grace in new and uncharted ways. As he writes, our age is so uncertain, skeptical, seeking, and homeless that there are not a few today, I believe, who stand directly before God. I do not know what else to say, except from my heart's core, I believe that God is at work. History is going forward in the depths, and we must be ready to play our part, trusting in what God is doing and in the forces he has made to stir within us. Guardini picks up these themes decades later in the twin books, The End of the Modern World and Power and Responsibility, on which Francis directly draws. Once again, supposed progress has made for an inhuman world. The human is treated as an object, kid A, kid B, and so on. The modern hope was that knowledge, as he writes, knowledge, commerce, production, each would perfect itself according to its own laws. All spheres of reality would be united into an overwhelming harmony. Everything in its right place. Yet, advances in science and technology have not been accompanied by moral or spiritual progress, which results once again in a deep sense of inhumanity. We now have enormous power, not only over non-human nature, but over human nature itself. Yet we do not know how to use it. The impression thus develops that power is an autonomous thing, existing separately from those who wield it. The conviction grows, Guardini writes, that power simply demands its own actualization. What is needed once again is a new humanity, one capable of exercising power with freedom, not under an iron logic of supposed progress, a new humanity for which Francis calls when he writes, in the famous passage, that there can be no renewal of our relationship with nature without a renewal of humanity itself. There can be no ecology without an adequate anthropology. Guardini proposes a strong sense, then, of freedom and possibility. Progress and power are not external forces to which humanity must submit. The human is free, not arbitrarily free, as in existentialism, but not externally determined, as in technologism or materialism. And this inherent freedom means that the future is open. There is the possibility of a radical conversion towards the truth. And Guardini is worth quoting here as he writes, "Man can only go back or ahead to the truth in which the saving metanoia can be realized. He cannot retreat behind any system of laws, whether of nature or of history. He himself must be answerable. The future will depend on those who know and are ready to accept the all-decisive fact that man himself is responsible for the turn history will take and for whatever becomes of the world and of human existence. He can take the right turn or the wrong. He must recover the will to see the essence of things and to do the right that it demands." End quote. This conversion does not amount to a radical passivity. Instead, conversion is freeing, as technology and science are humanly oriented towards freeing the good, the truth, and the beauty of the world. Man's is no passive security in the world, Guardini says. He must dare to seize the initiative, end quote, echoing the call in his earlier work for more technology, more human technology. In this way, progress can be made, not as an inevitable unfolding of power, but progress as conversion toward the truth of things, our ecosystems, non-human creatures, or those of other religions and convictions. Pope Francis, we recall, refers to ecological conversion. Conversion means seeing the world no longer as isolated individuals, viewing a world of isolated objects, but as a rich, dynamic community of creatures knit together in praise of God. We do not look at the world from without, but from within, Francis says, conscious of the bonds which the Father has linked us to all beings, with which. In light of Francis's call, I turn in conclusion to Raymond Panikkar. If Laudato Si pointed back towards its influence in Guardini, perhaps it points forward to Panikkar, another thinker who affirmatively cites Guardini and who rarely ceases in his calls for metanoia. Panikkar positions himself as a theologian of interreligious dialogue, not collapsing all religions and cultures into an imagined non-particular unity, and also firmly rejecting what he sees as the dangers of Christendom, colonialism, and monoculturalism. Difference and relation go all the way down. Conversion, as with Francis, is a turn toward the other of nature and the other of different religions and different myths. Such encounter and dialogue happen under the conditions of cultural disarmament, his phrase, where sharp exclusive walls come down and a relational journey into an unknown yet hopeful future becomes possible. Panikkar sketches a threefold structure of human time consciousness. Non-historical consciousness is in harmony with nature, if we recall the sailboat. Using forms of social life, Panikkar refers to the village, in harmony with the land and other creatures. Historical consciousness moves forward, like Guardini's steamship, looking towards a future of pure knowledge and technology in opposition to nature. Here Panikkar points to the city. Historical humanity and nature are in conflict, and historical progress is conquest, shaping environments not according to harmony, but according to human ambition and ability. Yet historical consciousness is in crisis. Echoing Guardini, Panikkar notes how inhuman our world has become, how much we ironically lack freedom in our mad pursuit of freedom. History has become not a dream, but a nightmare, he says, after listing a number of environmental and social ills. Man, said to be a historical being, discovers he cannot make history. This critique and lament, though, can only be undergone in light of hope, of a positive future, yet not according to a linear, inevitable progress. Instead, progress must again be understood as conversion. We cannot retreat back to a pre-modern immediacy, and yet the steamship approach to nature and to others is untenable too. And so Panikkar points to trans-historical consciousness, or what he elsewhere calls the new innocence. Half measures and substitutes will not do, he writes. Nothing short of a radical metanoia, a complete turning of mind, heart, and spirit, will meet today's needs. A conversion to trans-historical consciousness with Panikkar means a renewed recognition of limits, constantly turning to the truth or essence of things. And this involves relation, enduring and ongoing, never overcome by progress as domination. Instead, progress is a conversion towards the other. It is an encounter with and celebration of the self's limits and the relationality that exists on the boundaries of me and you, between us and nature, not impermeable, yet enduring. As he writes, you don't feel so much the need to interfere with nature as to enhance, collaborate, and allow her to be. To follow nature does not mean to follow blind mechanical forces, but to obey a divine plan, or rather a divine reality, which reveals itself to us in the shape of all that we call nature. Metanoia for Panikkar means a going beyond, meta, the mental or the rational, the nous, metanoia. It involves a turning of the mind towards what is other to mind and aligning oneself with that otherness. It is not a determinate ideology, but a posture, an approach to relationship. For Panikkar, this is a turn to dialogue with other people, other religions, and the material world. Writes Panikkar, one must tirelessly pursue efforts to speak, to understand, to make oneself understood, in order to open oneself to dialogical existence. Dialogue is not dialogue for reaching a solution, but is dialogue for being, since I am not without the other. End quote. What have we learned from Guardini and Panikkar about progress as conversion? How can we both critique progress, understood as monocultural and a linear movement of domination, yet also pursue progress, if understood as conversion away from my and our fixed mental categories, and towards the enduring beauty and strangeness of others and the world? We need to sink more deeply into the urgency of Tom York's concluding cry. What was it you tried to say? It is a question firmly fixed on the other. It needs to be continually asked with increasing passion, even frustration, especially in an age of too easy communication and bite-sized media. We might know the experience from intimate relations in our personal lives. What are you saying? Why can't I understand you? What is blocking our communion? But in an ecological context, this question must continually be asked of the world itself, of the trees and forests, the rivers and streams, the winds and the atmosphere, the soil and the plants and the animals, the soil and the plains, I should say. What are you trying to say? We can ask these realities. What have I or we missed about your essence, your voice, your relational purpose in the whole of things? And this is a summoning, engaged question. It does not involve a radical withdrawal from any human involvement, any human technology. It asks for more technology, as Guardini said, but more human technology. Technology that can engage in and draw out the meaningful depths of things in harmony with each other. Technology should not be something that drives us, but we it, which means perhaps choosing to not undertake certain scientific research or technological abilities. Converted people would be free, for example, to not create a new form of weaponry, to not examine unborn life for scientific knowledge. Writes Francis, we have the freedom needed to limit and direct technology. We can put it at the service of another type of progress, one which is healthier, more human, more social, more integral. To conclude with a lovely image from Francis, as he writes, an authentic humanity calling for a new synthesis, seems to dwell in the midst of our technological culture, almost unnoticed, like a mist seeping gently beneath a closed door. This new progress, this new synthesis never ceases to ask the question, not what am I trying to say, but what was it that you tried to say? You're trying to say. How can I and we progress through conversion towards asking and perhaps hearing what others, what nature, and what God are trying to say? Thank you very much.
We have about 7-ish minutes or so.
Because some people are in Zoom.
Oh, very good. Yeah, do you want to stand?
Oh, sure.
Questions or comments?
Part comment, part question, I suppose. I'm conscious of the choice of music that you led us off with in the spectrum of sailboat to steamship. It is probably, at least formally, a hovercraft or something far beyond. Does it represent to you a way of embracing technology that would be progress in a beneficial manner?
The song?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, in its kind of unsettledness and its like anxiety and its frustration with trying to connect in all these different ways, and how there's so many things in our modern world that prevent that form of connection and that type of conversion. But I think that you can hear, I didn't get to that part in the song, but you can hear the impassioned cry that there's something missing in the midst of all the technological keyboards and auto-tuning. You want to connect, you want to hear what were you trying to say. You want to hear what your spouse was trying to say, your friend, your neighbor of a different religion, and the earth itself. So it's that kind of like, it's like technology trying to burst out of itself. It's kind of what I'm hearing in that song.
Thanks very much, Ethan. You mentioned very quickly and then moved on something about Panikkar in the city. And I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about what Panikkar has to say about the city. You used the phrase humanity and nature in conflict in connection with what Panikkar had to say about the city. And the reason I'm interested in this is I've written a bit about particularly Jane Jacobs and her reflections on the city, and her analysis is that cities are made unnatural, but they can be made natural. That's a big over generalization, and that what we tend to do is to think about the dysfunctions of our cities, and as she says, we fail to recognize the things that are really humanizing in cities. So I was just wondering what Panikkar has to say about cities.
Yeah, that's a good question. He, the essay on 3 forms of human time consciousness goes into a lot of detail, and so I was just kind of pulling out his metaphors in line with the sailboat and the steamship. But I think that he would say we cannot simply go back to, we cannot simply have a village mentality, that cities are here to stay, and he's not going to say that everything about historical consciousness or about that form of linear progress is to be totally repudiated and dismantled. So I think he would encourage what you're talking about looking for the possibilities that we have in our cities, in our technology, in the current way we organize things. There's so much to lament and needs to be lamented, but the prophetic stance needs to take what is there and try to work with it, not violently against it, because that kind of repeats, I think, some of the problems that he has with historical consciousness, which is that very linear progress as a domination model.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Let me give a chance to ask a question. Go ahead.
Sure. Mine's more along the lines of Radiohead. So I did not ever buy Kid A, but I had a gay computer.
All right.
And one of my favorite songs was No Surprises. I'll take the quiet life with no alarms and no surprises, please.
Yeah.
How do we shake people out of that mindset?
Right.
Where they want the quiet life with no surprises, a handshake of carbon monoxide,
Right.
as the lyrics go, to get to the point where they're asking, what were you trying to say?
Well, my limited understanding of Radiohead's sort of trajectory is that, there was a lot of like personal angst and also trying to find a solution for his own internal struggles in OK Computer. And Kid A was deliberately trying to step away from that. It's more abstract, it's more technological, it's not as guitar driven, much less traditional. And so, in some ways, that's Tom York's or Radiohead's response, is to have people who are looking for another OK Computer open up Kid A, and they hear this, really, I love this keyboard riff. But then the song builds into this very discomforting, what were you trying to say, towards the end of the song. So that's how they did it. You need to. Tell people isn't there something deep within you that wants connection with others, real connection, a wholeness, a purpose that is not satisfied with this what soothes us to sleep in a technological age. So, and that the song we just listened to, Everything in its Right Place, it opens and concludes with just like the chillest keyboard riff. But Tom York is so anxious and frustrated as he's asking, "What were you trying to say?" The crescendo and the frustration really builds in, I think, a prophetic way. Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
So, Ethan, I found this paper very helpful. I read a lot of Panikkar, and my experience of reading him. So, like, he didn't talk about cosmotheatric experience or anything like that. So, I'm just wondering, like, are you picking up, like, one of the things I've discovered when reading Panikkar is that he has these philosophical treatises that are like very abstract and that sort of go off the deep end a little bit. And that's the stuff that Lonergan likes, actually. But then he's like has these essays that he's been asked to write that are incredibly incisive. And so I'm just wondering, like, I get the sense that probably your reading of him is based on a lot of those essays that are much more sort of specific and
that's right. Yeah. So, like the main one that I was drawing on was 3 Forms of Human Time Consciousness. And I remember speaking to you actually last year, and you said, "Oh, Lonergan on like systematic theology, not great, but on like secularism can be very helpful." And so, his writings on science, technology, they really like cut to the heart of things in a very clear, powerful way. And I found some interesting overlaps from Guardini and the propulsion forward to dialogue that Francis is always talking about is so fundamental. It's at the heart of both philosophical and the occasional pieces that Panikkar writes.
For sure. But I think that the more limited pieces tend to actually be more useful actually implementing it.
Right.
Versus these big ideas.
That's right. You're like, how'd you get there? Exactly.
Just before my heart stops, just to clarify, was that Panikkar is not that good on systematics, or
I think that's
Lonergan?
probably what I said. I probably said something different on Lonergan, but in terms
it was Panikkar.
Panikkar on secularism.
What kind of font of Lonergan is a systematic?
I was not talking about Lonergan.
Lonergan isn't very good on secularity, right? So
Maybe they're...
Put away the pitchfork. If you would join me in thanking you.
Yeah.